and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my road shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosing big holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to UCY Radio. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. It is Sunday night. It is 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock out for our comrades on the West Coast. And where the show we're talking about today, we're talking about the Palestinians, and we're kind of focusing. We're talking about the Syrian conflict. Talk about the Palestinians. A lot of them have joined their comrades in Syria in the fight against the Zionist proxies of the Free Syrian Army, the ISIS that has been proven to work with Israel, and many different terrorist groups that are inflicting the Syrian region. So these Palestinians have joined up and are fighting them, those groups in Syria alongside Assad. By the way, this is Chris J, the one and only host, and we have the one and only Chris J, and we have the one and only co-host of the show.
Hey,
Suarez,
Rafael McNamara, our guest, said he'd be calling in at 9:30. He's going to call in a little bit late.
Okay, so we have 30 minutes till he comes in the show, so he's going to have an interesting view because I don't know about exactly what's his position on Syria. I do know that he converted to Sunni Islam shortly after being freed from prison after spending 5.5 years for an act. Actually, that's why we brought him on the show, because the act that he did was in a protest in Philadelphia connected to Palestine, and they actually were about to put on a lot more serious charges. He was lucky to only have 5.5 years because they were trying to connect him to Hamas.
Up to 20 years, yeah.
Yeah, because they were trying to connect him with a terrorist charge, and which for being connected to Hamas, which there's two very wrong things with that he is not connected to Hamas. Neither was he back then, nor is he today.
Well, now they said material or not just material support, but like moral support to any terrorist organization is illegal according to U.S. law. So people that brought humanitarian aid or try to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza, which is under control of Hamas, they can say that's material aid, even though it's just medical supplies or whatever. And moral support means like giving advice. Now, if you advise Hamas to make peace with Israel, you're committing a crime in America.
The United States, ironically, one of the major things when you look at the Middle Eastern policy is that they consider, relatively nonviolent groups, that only they do not target civilians. Unfortunately, because it is war, sometimes the Israelis do target civilians. Sometimes Hamas, they're not targeting Israeli civilians. However, they get caught in the crossfire, but they kill a lot more IDF that are trying to kill Palestinian civilians. So they're not targeting civilians and not putting in. They're just an army, a militia, maybe the better word to call Hamas.
Well, I remember when Hamas and Hezbollah were united. But unfortunately,
yes,
now with what's going on in Syria, you have division on sectarian lines. But if you look at the reality in Syria, which is described in the description of the show that we put up on Facebook the other day, number one, the Syrian Arab army that's defending Assad's government are comprised of 90% Sunni. Number two, Assad's wife is Sunni, therefore his children are half Sunni. So, you know, unlike Iraq and Syria, the majority is Sunni, and Assad is an Alawite Shia. So it's not sectarian. What's happening is there's importing these radical Sunni groups, like ISIS, or ISIS affiliates, to attack the government of Assad, which is a government that defends minorities in a lot of cases as well, Assad being a minority himself, including the Kurds and the Christians. There are certain Kurdish and Christian groups that are fighting along the Syrian government. And of course, the Palestinian minority, the Palestinian refugees and their descendants in Syria, are also fighting for survival in the Yarmouk refugee camp on the outskirts of Damascus. There's a fight there as well, made up of various progressive militias of Palestinians that are there fighting alongside the Syrian Arab army, who are fighting the so-called Free Syrian Army and ISIS, who are, you know, basically one and the same at this point. And you know, I'm not sure if Raphael agrees all the way on that. If he wants to debate a little bit, you could have a caller come in as well at some point to debate. But I think on the fundamentals, Raphael agrees with us, especially on Palestinian rights, which he's fought for years. So he should be calling in within the next 20 minutes.
Well, you know, when it comes to it really makes it obvious, you know, when you see the Israeli connection by the fact that that when Free Syrian Army or even ISIS, when they not only do they get harbored by Israel, they get medical treatment in Israel. They receive training directly from Israel and the United States, and receive money, arms, and many other things, you know, for their combat operations. ISIS was practically constructed by the United States government as a CIA controlled proxy.
And Mossad as well. In the Golan, for example, Assad was chasing away some ISIS members, and this was after Obama pledged to fight ISIS in Syria. You know, Assad was you know, they went into Golan. Not only did they take refuge into Israel, the Israeli-controlled area, ISIS, but Israel shot back and fired at the helicopters that were chasing them in Assyrian territory. And you see similar situations with Turkey, who consistently are attacking Kurds while defending and letting ISIS tanks get through the Turkish border into northern Syria, into what the Kurds consider Kurdistan. So both Turkey and Israel, ironically, because their governments don't get along, are working together, along with NATO, the EU, the United States, and Israel, all in support of ISIS. So ISIS, I mean, the support that Assad's getting is not as strong as ISIS. I mean, yes, Assad's getting some support from Hezbollah, from Lebanon, from South Lebanon, and from Iran. But the Houthis in Yemen, they're getting very little support, and Assad himself is getting very little support. But the popular resistance, that is the people themselves within the country, are making sure those governments stay in place, including the new government in Yemen. And I know Raphael's against the intervention in Yemen as well. And it's really sad to see this division among Arabs, because even though Raphael has recently converted to Sunni Islam, he realizes, and we're going to have him elaborate on this, that these divisions among Muslims, especially in the Middle East, is just being taken advantage of the West to take their resources, like Galloway gave in that speech when he mentioned the importance of Arab unity. You know, he's fought for Palestinian Arab rights for decades. You know, you're familiar with Galloway as well, Chris. So, you know, I've talked with Raphael about this, and you know, again, on the fundamentals, when it comes on Arab unity, not intervening in Yemen, you know, obviously anti-ISIS. But unfortunately, a lot of Muslims have been tricked. I want to say a lot, because ISIS in the Middle East are not very popular. They see them as a CIA Mossad operation for what they are. But I think that the ISIS now is out of control, and they do have a significant amount, especially in Europe, of Muslims who have been tricked by them and think they do represent Islam. But we know from a former POW of ISIS that they didn't have a Quran around. A lot of these guys don't even know their own religion they're purporting to be. A lot of them are converts, and they're just using religion as a cover to maintain a political Wahhabism, which is very similar to Zionism if you look at its origins, from what it was with the Saudis and the Israelis. And as a matter of fact, the Israeli government and the Saudi government get along more than the Turkish government and the Israeli government. And the Israelis could care less if the Saudis got a nuclear bomb for Pakistan because they know they're not going to point it at Israel. They want to use that nuclear bomb and point it at Iran, at Yemen, which is the poorest country in the Middle East. It's just as poor as Palestine. There's no oil there. And now, the Houthi-dominated government in Yemen, much like in Syria, they're trying to instigate a civil war and they're attacking them. And like I said, like when Sisi responded to Al-Qaeda in Libya, after he killed Egyptian citizens, the ISIS killed Egyptian citizens and Christians, I think it was within his right. But the United States condemned that act because they did it unilaterally, without consulting the United States. Like Jordan consulted the United States when they used Air Force to retaliate against, I believe it was part of Syria where ISIS was, where they burned alive the Jordanian pilot. But it's like the United States likes Al-Qaeda when they're in Libya, right? Because those are the guys that took out Gaddafi. But when they're in Syria, then they're in the wrong. So there's just a complete contradiction in the imperialist agenda or policy of the United States.
I don't even think that it's that they like them in some places and they don't like them in other places. Like they say that, like when you say that they don't like them in Iraq, I think that in all reality they do like them in Iraq because they believe that.
No, I said in Libya. They like them in Libya, and Iraq's a different situation.
I mean that they done. You said that they didn't like them in Iraq. Or
no, I only talked about Libya and Syria. I didn't mention Iraq.
I'm saying is that some people put up that argument, is that and Iraq, is that their government has went to a more pro-Iranian government recently, especially ever since Maliki.
Yeah, they have a Shia. Maliki, the guy from Maliki is another Shia. Yeah, the Shia-dominated government in Iraq.
Yeah, but ever since he resigned last year and he stood down from the Iraqi prime minister spot, now it's became even more, pro-Iranian because they realize that Iran is going to be very crucial to fighting ISIS in our country. Many residents have the same opinion about the Iraqi residents are very against the United States intervention in Iraq because they've just all the damage that they've done already, and they say that the Iraqi population does not believe the United States is actually there to fight Iraq or fight ISIS. They believe they're there to destabilize the country even further, support ISIS because they know that
all these accidental drops in ISIS-held areas. You're going to tell me that with the logistic supremacy of the United States, they're going to accidentally drop supplies in ISIS-held areas? And then, like warehouses that store things for the Assad government are getting bombed when they're supposed to be attacking ISIS, and all this is accidental? Give me a break. And they're abandoning the Kurds, just like they did in Iraq. They're abandoning the Kurds now in Syria.
They're destroying literally, the United States is actually bombing Syrian oil, refineries that belong to Assad because they want to destroy his economy. They want to take out the food sources to stabilize the country.
It belongs to the Syrian people who, in large swaths, voted for Assad recently. Yes, there was other parts of the areas that were under ISIS control where they prohibited the vote, but in large swaths of the country, many minorities, people, Christians that were Kurds, they went ahead and voted for Assad because they saw him as a stabilizing leader. I mean, look what happened with Gaddafi when he was taken on Libya, completely destabilized the region. If you look at the history, that would be easily predictable, And somebody described it once to me as they weren't ready for democracy. But I don't think that the imperialists in NATO, when they bombed Libya, were ever intended for the government to be democratic, because the government was democratic in many ways under Gaddafi. They were interested in taking Libyan oil and having control over Libya. But ironically, because of the instability, they haven't been able to get a lot of oil out of Libya. There's large areas that are controlled by tribes that won't let any oil get out. And they haven't even conducted or concluded the trial of Saif al-Islam, who they've had since 2011. That's the son of Gaddafi, because the tribe doesn't want to give him over to Tripoli. They don't trust. One tribe doesn't trust another, With the exception of Benghazi, all the tribes were united under Gaddafi because he was a charismatic leader, he was socialistic, and he was using the resources to better his people and to unite Africa, North Africa and Sub-Saharan included. So a lot of people don't realize what Gaddafi was. and they don't realize how Assad, since 2000, when he was in power, have been a stabilizing force defending the minorities within Syria.
You know what's funny is that it's like I was thinking, because it's like I know that was last show that we did, and we're done with that topic. But Alex Jones, is supportive of Assad to an extent. It seems like, and he actually put up videos of, that Syrian patriot, the young woman that's like 20 that puts up the videos from Syria about that.
She's worked with Alex Jones. She's called the Syrian girl or whatever. She goes by the Syrian girl.
She doesn't work with Alex Jones. Alex Jones puts up her videos. I don't think she actually works.
No, she actually hosted his show for him when he couldn't come in. Like, that's how closely they work. She was in the studios replacing him for that day.
Well, yeah, it's like
she herself claims not to be pro Assad, and she is Sunni, but she says that she's against any intervention in Syria, and she's obviously against what ISIS is doing. I believe she lives in a Gulf state country, so she lives in exile, but she supports the resistance against ISIS in Syria, and she's worked with Alex Jones. But Alex Jones tends to say nice things about guys that call themselves socialists and then go ahead and defame socialism. I mean, even Jesse Ventura is sympathetic to socialism. He's talked about Che Guevara, and he said,
"Where's the Che Guevara T-shirt?"
He said something. Wait, let me finish. You mentioned this to me, actually. Jesse Ventura recently said some nice things about Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders claims to be a socialist. But again, if you actually look at Bernie Sanders' foreign policy, he's gone along with democratic imperialism. Okay, so I don't care if you're a Republican imperialist or a Democratic imperialist, you're still an imperialist. And Jesse Ventura might back out his support for that, right? Because he did initially support Trump, and then he obviously didn't like the Mexican statements because Ventura lives half the year in Mexico. And Ventura himself might run on the Libertarian ticket next year, which I think would be great.
Well, if Ventura does run, he has to. For one thing, I think that he's waiting around too long because, even the Libertarian Gary Johnson has pretty much made clear that he hasn't officially announced, but he's made it 99.9% sure that he'll run. And it's like, I have him as a friend on Facebook, Gary Johnson. It's like, he's a generally good guy, but he's too...
Is Daryl Sherney going to run against Joe Steinwitz in the Greens? You hear about this Mimi guy that's saying now that he wants to take over what Dean Capone wanted to do, the socialists? Like, what's going on with these third-party candidates?
And I think the third party can't... none of them are really that organized. Really, that's what the problem is that they lack organization. But,
it's like... You got to get rid of the electoral college. You got to have the direct vote. You got to have them in the presidential debates. It's a catch-22. They literally, chained and arrested the Green Party candidates last...
It's not even... You're forgetting the big
one.
At
the debates.
You're forgetting the big thing, the Bilderberg Committee. Right. What about that? Is that even if you got rid of all
bureaucratic committees need to be shut down. But we just take steps one at a time to ensure that the third parties have a chance. Because they didn't have electoral college in Venezuela when Chavez's third party came about and was able to take power. You have to have a revolutionary movement, not reformist, to bring all those things about. But I don't want to get too much off topic.
Well, I'm just saying the Bilderberg Committee is the main denominator because they literally do make the decisions. I don't care what anybody says.
They have to be blackmailable to become a presidential candidate. That's how they control them. They've been spying on Obama since he was a congressman. The Snowden revelations helped reveal that. Instead of Obama commending Snowden's whistleblowing, because he had claimed to be for transparency and pro-whistleblowing, Obama in the beginning, he said that it was an act of treason. Even trying to go after Assange for treason when he's not even a U.S. citizen. And Assange is still in the embassy. Snowden's still in exile. I don't see any justice in these guys' cases either.
Weren't the thing that they were going for Julian Assange, it wasn't for treason, it was another charge. It was still, they were going to try to get him for espionage.
But they also at times called him treasonous. And that could have been in reference to the West, but he was exposing U.S. government policy. But they were still trying to bring that to Assange. So, just contradictions of the empire, of the rhetoric of the empire, of the propaganda of the empire.
Yeah, they almost make it seem like Assange, they almost ignore the fact that he's not even from this country, and then they try to make it seem like that he was an American citizen that did that, or they try to connect it that just because he's from the West that doing something against the United States government's treasonous, and it just shows their dangerous mentality is that
Because they consider Europeans their slaves. It's not even a question of are they your partner, are they equals? Like no, Europe has to follow the Washington's orders like slaves. And a lot of what went on in Greece was because of U.S. influence as well. Okay, so you can argue that the IMF, right, that would make the Greeks do these austerity measures, is only owned 20% by the U.S. taxpayers. But who has the guns? The guns is what matters. So who's going to send the economic hitmen to these countries to pressure them, to pressure these democratic governments as they try to do in Latin America? Is the U.S. government using the IMF as a facade, as a front? The IMF are financial terrorists. They have to be called for what they are. And Assad's one of the guys not bought off by the IMF, right? That's why they're going after him. It's like with Gaddafi.
Yeah, Assad doesn't have Rothschild bankers in this country like a lot of the world does. He only has there's only a few countries that don't. There's only like 3 in the Middle East that don't have them, and that's right. Or actually Yemen's on the way of kicking them out. They would the Houthis definitely would if they actually had a solid grip of their country. So it's really 2. It's Syria and Iran.
Yemen, yeah.
It used to be. Libya used to be 1, and it was about to be all of Africa because Libya was trying to unite all of Africa against the West.
Yeah.
And it's like when you come down to it, the Rothschilds and these bankers, they all are a common denominator in all these Western countries, and they that's why these Western countries group themselves almost together, and that's how we should see it. It's not just the United States; it's the whole West in general. And really the West trying to expand its borders until they take over the entire world. That's what the New World Order is about, is that the IMF, the status quo of these bankers that we have, controlling everything, in countries like the United States, they're trying to push that all around the world till every country has, one common denominator, Rothschild bankers. And there's only a few countries that don't have them. And you see them constantly trying to attack them, say that they're dictatorships, that they need freedom, that they need to, Venezuela recently became one, in the last 10, 15 years during the Chavez administration, and he got the gold back to Venezuela, which was a major step in towards true sovereignty of a country. And, of course, he kicked out the Rothschild bankers pretty early, and you could see what they went down the path of Venezuela, just going to most
Chavez
absurd.
Was radicalized thanks to the coup attempt of 2003. That really steered him to the left, and it got him out of reformism and brought him to a more revolutionary stance. And he started reaching out to allies in Latin America and taking measures to prevent the banksters or the imperialists from taking over Venezuela again.
And, Cuba, and I want to bring up Cuba just because today's a historic day. Well, it's an anniversary of a historic day, 56 years ago. So it was the start of the July 26 movement, which eventually overthrew Fulgencio Batista.
It was the attempt on the attack of the Moncada barracks when Batista was in power, when Castro first became a political prisoner. He was released a couple of years later because of political pressure. A lot of the people that attacked Moncada were tortured to death. So Fidel was a survivor. He went and hid in the jungle, surrendered, was held prisoner, and then went to exile in Mexico, where he subsequently met Che, and they had the Grand expedition that started the Cuban Revolution. But yeah, the attack on Moncada barracks started the July 26 movement was a Martyrian movement based out of the Cuban liberator Jose Marti, or the Apostle of the Cuban Independence movement, as he's called. So yeah, that really started it in the 50s. The attempt on Moncada barracks. Fidel in the speech at the trial said, "History will absolve me," and he himself was a lawyer, Fidel, so he was a good orator from the early days, from his college days, and when they started the Moncada, attempt in eastern Cuba. Yeah.
And eventually Cuba took out the Rothschild bankers in their country and sent them out of Cuba. And
they kicked out the mob. They shut the casinos down. They took away the properties owned by Americans. So they made a lot of enemies early on, and they had to take extreme measures to prevent themselves from being overthrown. Eventually, the embargo blockade was instituted as well. So it's really a case in point, the Cuban example, which later on helped inspire movements in Latin America. Initially, those movements were sabotaged, like when Che tried to start his own movement in Bolivia, but a couple generations later, we see now in Latin America the democratic route, that legacy is being fulfilled. And that's something that the Arabs should look at, that the Africans should look at, to use real democracy and the resources and the riches that they have to better the conditions of the people. And that's something that Assad has attempted to do. He has to give it in to the Zionists, and that's why ISIS was initially formed by Mossad and CIA to go after Assad. And now ISIS is out of control. Just U.S. policy backfiring as usual, just like it was just the days up to when the Taliban started, when they imported these Arabs along with bin Laden to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. Just the same old U.S. policy, same old insanity, as Einstein would call it, making the same mistakes. So that's the reality that we see right now.
And it's it's the plan. This is how it's been since the 70s, really, with the United States MO in the Middle East. I mean, they already had, the United States had similar, and it really, some of the same enemies they've had for a long time in the Middle East. The government was trying to take out for a long time, and then just recently, last few years, they actually took out, Gaddafi, that they've been really trying to get ever since the 80s. Really, I mean, the 80s is where Reagan attacked them.
Well, he was in power from the 1960s on, the late 1960s on. And he wasn't really friendly with it.
1969 Gaddafi to power, but at the very beginning, the United States wasn't effectively going after him. It wasn't until around the late 70s into 80s he actually in '86 they actually bombed Libya the first time, and they killed Gaddafi's son, or not? Yeah, I think it's his brother. His brother got killed in the '86 attack, and it was pretty devastating actually for the little attack that happened.
His adopted daughter was killed in the 80s as well. The same day that they captured that they killed bin Laden, supposedly, Gaddafi had another family member that was killed in a strike, because by then Gaddafi was still alive. I remember when all that was going on. I'm going to say something. In 1979, we also have to realize, 1979, the U.S.-backed Shah left Iran, and that really started a whole revolutionary movement when the Ayatollahs took over. It wasn't just Iran. The United States was scared that this was going to spread throughout the Middle East, not necessarily Shia movements, but kind of like an Arab Spring against the West post-79. So in the 80s, they saw Libya. Libya's going to be another Iran, and they're going to help the Sunnis rise up, and that's part of the reason why they started attacking Gaddafi at that time under Reagan.
And also, Egypt, they've been tinkering with for a long time because they realized how strategically important.
Sadat was a sellout. You know that. Sadat sold out Gaza.
I'm talking about Nasser. After Nasser, they've been trying to tinker with their affairs for a long time. And I think they leaned them towards what happened. I think that originally I'm not sure if he was a sellout from the beginning, but very quickly it looks like the United States started to influence them. And then, Mubarak took over, and he was pro-Western from the start.
Mubarak was another Sadat, and Gaddafi knew that very well.
And then eventually, it's that Gaddafi and Mubarak were enemies. Really, they were not allies at all. And they were enemies for a long time, and they both were in each country for a long time. Then Mubarak, got overthrown in the Arab Spring, and then they tilted Morsi to be a sellout, and I think that they had infiltrated the Muslim Brotherhood. Or, Muslim Brotherhood does have a history with the United States.
Was much more happy about Morsi.
Let's look. Muslim Brotherhood has been pro-United States since after World War II. That's how old their organization is, and that was only
interested in the blockade of Gaza. Staying under Morsi, incredible measures were taken to end the Egyptian side of the blockade of Gaza. The problem is that when Sisi took over, which the United States is much more happy with than Morsi, they made measures even worse than Mubarak against the people of Gaza.
But it was just a charade. It's like Turkey. Turkey's supposedly anti-Zionist, but they're not in reality. It's just it's a charade to make it look like I think just to gain support that they normally wouldn't have, and they would just be completely unpopular if they didn't pretend. Morsi might have done some things at the beginning just to gain popularity, like the guy in Turkey, Erdogan. But the reality is, if we didn't get to see what would actually happen if Morsi would have stayed in power, but I bet you that he would have been shaking hands with Netanyahu within a few years, because this is what happens to Middle Eastern leaders, and it's like he would have been turned more. He was already going down the path, and the leftists in this country did not like him. The only people that liked him were right wing. He was also very, corporatistic, because Muslim Brotherhood actually has roots. Let's not forget where they started from, the Nazi Germany. They were the Nazi proxy in North Africa. Then it got turned to Britain, which is, some of it's the same bankers controlled Nazi Germany and Britain. Britain became the influencing force from the Muslim Brotherhood. Then the United States turned it into a pro-business, pro-corporation, but also add a little bit of religion in there to make it this thing called the Muslim Brotherhood throughout the years to be a counter, and eventually, I think really what would look like it was to cause strife between the Middle Eastern groups, because at one time all three, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and Hezbollah, were allied with each other. But how I see it is the Muslim Brotherhood, some of their ugly traits got transferred over to Hamas. Hamas now has redeemed themselves. Muslim Brotherhood doesn't seem like they'll ever redeem themselves. And then they split off from Hezbollah, who's never been corrupted yet to this point. And now, now none of them are allied with each other, really, because, Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, they have their differences.
Well, remember, for 30 years, Syria occupied part of Lebanon. For about 20 years, Israel occupied part of Lebanon. And when Syria finally left Lebanon after the assassination of Hariri, which a lot of people think Israel did, and they try to make like the Syrians did it. But after the assassination of Hariri, who my father met, by the way, when he traveled to Lebanon in early 2001, and his son took over later on. But I don't think his son's the prime minister now. But after the assassination of Hariri in, forget the year, I think it was 2006. Yeah, 2006. The Syrians finally left, and Hezbollah was left there to maintain not just Syrian interests, but Shia interests in the south of Lebanon. At one point, when the Israelis were occupying South Lebanon, which was occupied till like the year 2000, they had Christian militias that were backing up the Zionists in southern Lebanon, but then they were kicked out. But yeah, there's a lot of history there, right next door to Syria and Lebanon. And the Syrian-Lebanon border, or Lebanese border, was invented by the British and the French. They divided up the lands and the colonies for themselves, and they said for humanitarian grounds they had to come defend the Christians in these lands. I mean, just like they said it was a humanitarian intervention in Libya. It's a joke. It's the same old imperialist justification that the U.S. gave, that France gave, and Britain gave.
But my point is that the Muslim Brotherhood, they're not a real anti-Zionist group, and they're definitely not anti-Western. They might have done a couple things that alleviate the suffering of Palestinians, but really it's like, yes, the Turkish did the flotilla, but they cannot be supported because they are one of the biggest trading partners of Israel. It's like they're hypocritical. Why haven't the
Turks supported any other flotillas that tried to go into Gaza? And also the Greeks have betrayed the cause, because I saw a picture of Tsipras before he took over in Greece at a pro-Palestinian rally wearing the Palestinian flag around his neck.
Sign a deal with
and now Syriza has a military deal with Israel. And there's some other back channel deal between Turkey and Israel as well. The governments aren't friendly with each other, but I don't see Turkey supporting other flotillas. Like they said,
my point is that's what Morsi
flotilla had a former Tunisian president on board, and they imprisoned him.
And also,
the others
Morsi,
they didn't have
how he treated the Syrian
or the
president.
Pakistani Navy there to defend them, And the Pakistani Navy's got nukes. Israel doesn't have a navy that's that large.
Well, my point is that Morsi we shouldn't be respecting him for what he did because of how he treated Assad, a true anti-Zionist, and what he's equivalent to is another enemy of Assad that's supposedly anti-Zionist. He was Egypt's Erdogan, is what I'm trying to point at. That's all he was. He was another Erdogan.
Well, yeah, he was allied with Erdogan, and he pissed off a lot of people in Egypt, just like Erdogan pissed off a lot of people in Turkey. I'm not saying that Morsi was the same. I'm just saying that undeniable fact that he completely lifted the blockade of Gaza. But Sisi did the complete opposite afterwards. Those are two undeniable facts. And I know you're not a fan of Sisi either, right? I mean, Sisi has shown himself more a slave to Tel Aviv, Washington than even Mubarak was. And so the Egyptian revolution failed. The left need to have organized in Egypt, you know.
Well, it's like, though I think in a way it's almost like the fact that at least now we know, it's like at least Sisi's open about, it's like, because Morsi would have became Zionistic as eventually and would have been doing business deals with Israel eventually, just like Turkey does. But they would be hiding under a mask, and then they would leave a lot of people in the United States. That's where they mostly fool. They don't fool Middle Easterners. They fool American activists that they are anti-Zionist. At least now, nobody can be fooled by Sisi, because Sisi puts it right there out in the open what he is. He's a Zionist. He kisses Tel Aviv's ass. He kisses DC's ass because as much as there seems to be this little conflict, it doesn't seem like it really means anything, because supposedly Egypt and U.S. relations are not well, but U.S. still gives them military aid. So it doesn't. It's not very convincing. And what Egypt needs now is to put in the Nasir. I don't see why they didn't do it right after Morsi fell, or even before. In 2013, that would have been a very good time, because there were a lot of leftists that were tricked, because Sisi acted a lot differently before he was actually elected into power. Sisi was. He said
everybody knew he was part of the military establishment. Was formerly allied to Mubarak. He was never elected. He took over power against the will of the Egyptian people, who were too.
I'm saying a lot of leftists supported him. A lot of leftists support him because he acted a lot different. I don't think people. It's true, because they did not. But what they should have done is that they shouldn't have let that guy come into power, and they should have made sure Sisi rushed an election.
The military has the power in Egypt. That's the problem. Until the military loses power in Egypt, they're going to have the guy that they want in there, and they're going to continue to have anti-Palestinian propaganda against the will of the Egyptian people, and be able to manipulate the far right and enough Egyptians to let the government stay in there.
Well, yeah, and Egypt, I just say is that why we talk about them is that because they are, at times it's like really at times they've been also very strongly impacting of Syria. It seems like it's been a long time since there actually was any kind of you have to go back to the times of Nasser to actually find a time where Syria and Egypt worked together, and so did Libya. Gaddafi, there was Nasser.
There wasn't a war against Israel under Sadat. You could argue that Sadat had well intentions in the beginning, but then he gave in and made a peace deal. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't have made a peace deal, but it was a bad deal, because instead of guaranteeing independence of Gaza as part of a Palestinian state, they just left Gaza and said, Israel, go ahead and do whatever you want to the Gazans as long as we get the cyanide back. So that was a sellout. Egypt had been protecting Gaza for decades. And for them to leave them on their own like that was the wrong move. And most people in the Middle East at that point felt the same way about what Sadat had done. They saw it as a betrayal. And he could have gone to Tel Aviv. He could have went to Tel Aviv, to the Knesset they had there, to the Congress they had there, and said, that's my condition for coming to Israel, make peace. Let's do it in Tel Aviv so it's not controversial. He went to Jerusalem, of all places, the third holiest city in Islam. He went to a city disputed by Christians and Muslim Palestinians against the Zionist entity, and he said, no, I don't care. He practically recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's like the height of betrayal. So what is a question of selling out Gaza?
I just want to put out there.
Raphael's going to call in soon. He said he's looking for a quiet spot so that he can call in.
Yeah, because it's 9:40. I was under. Yeah. It was almost 9:40.
He's telling me he's looking for a quiet spot. He's just out of jail. He's past few weeks he's still in the halfway house, so he's looking for a spot so he can call in.
I want to point out though is that it's that I think that in the activist community is that people should look at what has happened in Egypt. When it was Morsi, it's like I find this is bad. People support Morsi in general, and I think that he should be the leader of Egypt if he's freed one day. And I think that Morsi should be looked at the same way as Turkey's Erdogan, and that they're both they both were shams. They might have done good things while Turkey's original support of the flotilla. Yeah, that was that was a decent move. I mean, you can't really say anything about it. And same thing about the blockade. That was a really good lifting the blockade. However, they were just acts of gain support from.
I'm not willing to talk about Egypt anymore. It's too off topic. We're supposed to be talking about Syria and Palestine.
Well, I mean, it's all in the same region, and at one point, Egypt. That's what I say. You have to go back to the 60s and 70s, or actually, the 60s, early 70s, when Nasser died in 70. That's really the last time where Syria and Egypt had a good connection, because at that time, Syria, Fez al-Assad actually took power about the same time as Nasser's death. He died really early. He was like Chavez in a way. Chavez, had the same kind of unification of South America he wanted to do. Nasser was very, on board of unifying Africa against the Rothschilds, just as, Chavez has effectively done really in South America, and now Maduro continues his legacy. Nasser didn't get a Maduro. He got a traitor pretty much, Sadat. But, back then it looked a lot different, with Fez al-Assad, Gaddafi, Nasser all working together. In fact, at one point, there was the unified Arab Republic between Libya and Egypt.
That's when Gaddafi was working more on pan-Arabism and reaching out to the Middle East. But then when that failed, he became more of a pan-Africanist like Lumumba or that other guy that they said that was the African Che Guevara. What was his name?
Sankara.
Yeah, like a Sankara and Lumumba. In North Africa, Gaddafi started forming the African Union through Pan-Africanism after that as well.
But it wasn't. At one point, though, Syria.
He wasn't liked by the Arab
Egypt,
Gaddafi. Yeah.
And it wasn't in Syria, Egypt, and Libya were all part of the same country at one point, weren't they? No, that was in the unified Arab Republic. That was in the 60s, I believe, or not? Yeah, it was in the late 60s, wasn't it? I think I don't know. I'm getting confused. Anyways,
took power in 69.
Yeah, so it was around. Anyways, that's a little bit off topic. I want to get back to we strayed off the talk about the Palestinians. We didn't even mention the Jabril Brigade, which is not really that much involved in combat, and the PFL.
Let's clarify what the Jabril Brigade is. Mr. Jabril is the founder of the Palestinian Front. The People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. That's a mouthful. The General Command, or JC, let's call it that whole organization JC for short. Jabril was born in 1948 Palestine in the 30s. So when I say 1948 Palestine, I'm saying that Palestine before it was taken over by Israel in 1948. And then his family immigrated when he was a child to Syria. He was raised in Syria, and the Mr. Habash, who's a Palestinian Christian, started the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and he started the General Command Group, which is a militant group of that in Syria. And they recently were in Yarmouz, in that refugee camp of Palestinians in the outskirts of Damascus, fighting ISIS. I heard that he had to leave the city, but you still have the PLA, the Palestinian Liberation Army, fighting over there. So that's what's going on right now in Syria in regards to the Palestinians. The conditions in the camp are bad, and it's not because of Assad's government, it's because of ISIS going in there attacking. I've never seen ISIS attack an Israeli. You know what I mean?
No,
they go into Golan or Tel Aviv hospital, or they get protected by Israel, but they're not interested in attacking Israel. They're interested in attacking other Muslims or real Muslims. Regardless if they're Sunni or attacking Palestinians who are descendants or themselves refugees, having fled persecution and come to Syria for decades. They're now being persecuted by elements within Syria. It's sickening that this is going on. And it's something that I'm sure that Raphael, who's been a fighter for Palestine, is thinking about as well. And hoping to call in. If he doesn't call in soon, I suggest, Chris, you put the number out so we can have anybody call in to add to the discussion or debate on this important issue. Because it's an issue that the mainstream media, as we should call them, doesn't really talk about.
And I think that why they don't talk about it, they don't talk about it because it's such a crucial issue, because they've been fear-mongering with Syria and Iran, for years now. It's like I remember back in 2012, the big thing was, was that the United States and Israel would attack Iran soon. I still believe, even though that the deal has been signed, consider that the United States has immediately given arms to Israel I think it's in considering that in 2002 a similar thing happened between the United States and Saddam. So it's a bit different situation. It might not be exactly comparable, but I'm just saying is that before the United States intervened in the country, sometimes they trick the leaders of that country to make it seem like they're actually trying to make peace, and then a year later they'll invade. And I think that it might not be a year later, but it might be 2 or 3 years later. The United States will enter Iran, or try to, and with Syria, I think they've already have started. It's not even the invasion is not something in the future. It's already started because the United States has been, like we said, bombing oil refineries that belong to Assad, bombing warehouses of food. In fact, the direct result was people having to stand in food lines right after the United States started attacking Syria, supposedly attacking ISIS. And also, the United States is supposed to be directing most of their attacks in eastern Syria, where ISIS is supposedly coming from Iraq into Syria. The only thing is that where they're attacking, ISIS has been making gains, where the Syrian army has been doing a counteroffensive of stopping the forces coming from Iraq. They actually have been making advances against ISIS, while the United States, so you're telling me that the United States overly equipped, and if they were really trying to put an effort, it seems like they're actually doing a counterproductive, because also right before the United States entered the country last fall, I believe it was in the fall, or was it late summer, the United States, ISIS attacked the Syrian air defense to make sure that Syria could not do anything to retaliate.
Chris, I'm going to give it a break and try to call Raphael and see what's going on. He said he tried to call once before, but I didn't see the call come in. All right?
All right. And, and another thing that's happened.
Did you try a second time to call in?
Huh?
No, I'm talking to Raphael. Go ahead, Raphael.
Oh, you're talking to Raphael. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, you're not in the show. I'm Chris is taking over the program while I'm calling you.
But I wanted to finish off with saying is that also, another thing that's happened is that the Syrian Arab army has actually been protecting minorities such as Christians, where rebels and ISIS have been attacking these Christian sites, while the Kurds, also have been attacked by the rebels and ISIS. And the Syrian Arab army has been protecting the Kurds, and along with fighting alongside with the Kurds. And unlike what the United States claims, there's actually an alliance between the Syrian Arab army and the Kurds right now against the Free Syrian Army, the Syrian opposition, and ISIS.
Chris, you want to go ahead and say the number, because I think he's dialing the wrong number.
Did you give him you probably gave him a Blog Talk Radio number. He's probably not be able to get through to it.
No, it's the number that you put up on the old. Do you have the number with you? Can we compare numbers?
Well, it's 718-717-8296. That's the one.
Okay, I had 727 instead of 717. That's what the problem was. Okay, you should be calling in shortly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like you had the you put my area code. You put St. Pete's area code. I don't even know what this one is. That you based out of, but yeah, and it's with Syria. I wanted to point out is that the United States is claiming that they are protecting the Kurds while they're financing the people that kill the Kurds. They finance the Free Syrian Army, who is they actually have been shown to attack the Kurds. All these al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, or Al-CIA, as I like to call them, and the ISIS all attack the Kurds, and the United States tries to claim that they protect the Kurds. The only people that are protecting the Kurds are the Syrian Arab army, and then the Kurds have their own military forces. It's not a four-sided conflict, almost like the United States tries to claim. It's way more simpler than that. It's a two-sided conflict. The Syrian Arab army, the Kurds, against the supposed Syrian opposition, the moderate opposition, and the ISIS. They're all on one side.
The last one that I texted you.
And the Syrian Arab army and the Kurds are all on one side. It's a two-sided conflict, and unlike what the mainstream media.
It doesn't matter if you're just calling for 5 or 10 minutes, or you call back again before 11. It's fine. All right.
the corporate media, tries to make it seem like it's something different that's going on in Syria. They do not mention the Palestinians. That our media is generally anti-Palestinian. As you can see, what's their coverage with Israel? They always, they're defending Israel, constantly.
Well, Rick Sanchez of CNN was thrown off for his pro-Palestinian views. He wasn't even being pro-Palestinian. He was just questioning, why is it so many Palestinians are dying and so few Israelis? Like, just using his logic, like seeing Palestinians as actual human beings. And, part of the reason why because he's Latino, but, Rick Sanchez was thrown off because of that. Okay, I think Raphael's calling in now. Raphael, you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the program. Yeah, Raphael said he has to call in this time just for a few minutes, and he'll try to call in later in the show, 411. Raphael, we've been talking a lot about the Middle East. We tend to go off on tangents a bit. We were supposed to talk about Syria and Palestine, the Palestinian condition in Syria. We talked a little bit about the history, about Egypt, because Chris and I are very familiar with the history of the Middle East, as I'm sure you are as well. But let me ask you, are you familiar with the conditions of the Yarmouk refugee camp outside of Damascus?
I mean, I know of some of their struggles. I mean, that's the most I can say there. That's not in depth.
I'll clarify it for you. Is that in Syria, there's a lot of Palestinian refugees that live in Syria, and that the fact that a lot of these Palestinians have picked up arms and they've joined stuff like the Jabril Brigade, which is a part of the PFL GC. It's connected to that Palestinian group, the Palestinian Front for Liberation of Palestine. The General Command is the name of it officially. That's in Palestine. So they've picked up arms, and they picked up arms alongside with Assad because they realize the truth about these Syrian rebels, quotations, that they're not even Syrian. A lot of them are not even Syrian, and they're not rebellion against they are being financed by real tyranny. They're being financed by Saudi Arabia. They're being financed by Israel. They're being financed by the United States, and they work alongside with ISIS, the Syrian rebels.
Don't forget Turkey as well, because Turkey is facilitating their entry into Syria and probably at some level financing them as well. The only country that has a conflict of ISIS is Turkey.
So it's like, and the Palestinians are fighting these fake rebels. They're fighting these foreign mercenaries now because the Palestinians are defending. They know that Assad is truly anti-Zionist, while these fake rebels are pawns of Zionism. That's what's going on with the Palestinians in Syria.
Yeah, can I just say something? There's a okay. The Palestinians are dispersed in many lands, and Syria, Jordan, Lebanon have large populations, a lot of them in refugee camps. And a lot of times those populations that are a lot of times destitute are used in political games. And I think that conflict is doing what a lot of conflicts throughout the Middle East have done, has used the Palestinian cause to motivate whoever they want to motivate. And I know that talking to people in Palestine, I think there's a different perspective, and then you've got to think, why then do the Palestinians in that specific refugee camp or area have the mindset that they do? Is it because of some logical analysis, or is it because of just trying to survive? And I know, like in Gaza, most of the Palestinians are against Assad and against the forces, and have risked, some political stability and support to take that position. And I think that that's based upon more of a... What?
You're talking about Hamas, right?
I'm talking about the people there in a more general sense. Hamas, of course, they've come out and whatever else, but no, I'm talking more about the people. Now, does Hamas have influence over the perspective that I might get from the people? Maybe, but I know people that are in Gaza that are anti-Hamas, that are also anti the Assad regime and pro-rebel.
What would be a logical reason that anybody would have that stance? Because here's, for one thing, is that Assad has done more than most Arab governments have done. In fact, even Turkey or these countries that claim to help the Palestinians won't do anything to help.
Yeah, besides the flotilla, which was a good initial effort,
Assad actually
nothing after that.
Is actually a force that could actually, that actually keeps Israel somewhat in check. And, Israel's been targeting Syria for a long time, and not the Syrian people, but the Syrian government and the Syrian people. A lot of the Syrian people support Assad. In fact, 70% do. And the Palestinians, some of them are going to be.
Wait, 70% of who support Assad? I didn't hear you.
Well, there was an election, Raphael, in 70% of Syria. 30%
Syria.
controlled by ISIS at that time. So there was an election in 70% of Syria, and they did, by a majority, vote for Assad. Whatever the motivations were. Yeah.
I think that's just getting a little bit off topic of the point that I was trying to make, which isn't on from the perspective of Palestinians that I talk to, both in Gaza, in the West Bank, and outside in the West. Their perspective is that Assad's being a proponent of the Palestinian cause or whatever it is very similar to what many Arab leaders do and have done, which is just use them in a way, because there has been brutality against other factions that are aligned with the Palestinian cause by Assad. There has been, the plight of the Palestinians in Syria isn't that well.
I see what you're trying to say. I see what you're trying to say, Rob.
Go ahead, finish your point, Raphael.
But real quick.
Here's the thing: is that you're trying to say that Assad, just recently took up the Palestinian view in the last
5 minutes. Let him speak really quick.
But he's had a pro-Palestinian view and an anti-Zionist. So did his father for 45 years now.
Yes, we understand that. Raphael, finish your point real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and a lot of Assad's anti-Zionist cause and pro-Palestinian is because of the fact that the Golan Heights is occupied by Israel, and he wants to somehow walk that line of getting the people who would be at the front line to support him, which would be the Palestinians against Israel, and at the same time, not lose that land by just taking it. So he's walking. That's the perspective that I got from people in Gaza and people outside of Gaza. And there's no doubt, I think we can all agree that the Palestinian cause by almost all Arab leaders is just something that they use again and again without really trying to liberate the Palestinian people. It's so common. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the Saudis like Israel more than they like Palestine. Very clear, because they see the Israelis as a buffer between them and the Iranians. The Saudis are really afraid of the power of Iran. I mean, that's what they're doing. What they're doing in Yemen, because they see the Houthis as Iranian allies.
Well, I want to point out one thing is that let's look is that I think part of the reason that again he's saying that is because yes, there are the Arab leaders that do not care about Palestine whatsoever. Like Turkey, for example, that do business deals on one of Israel's biggest trading partners, and they use the Palestinian issue often a long time to put support for the Turkish government. But nobody falls. People in the Middle East don't fall for that bullshit anymore. Maybe some activists in the United States that are misinformed. I hate to smash on the activist community, but I'm just saying that there are some activists. We gotta point out the ones that are.
It sometimes, so don't apologize.
But yeah, so it's like because we are activists too, me and Al. But I'm just saying is that there are some that are misinformed on the Middle East and just support whatever. And they don't really have any knowledge of that. What I'm saying is that some of them support, but the people in the Middle East, they don't fall for that Turkish, propaganda. They know Syria, however, does real steps against Zionists. And one of the things they do is that they refuse to ever recognize the Zionist state. Number 2 is that they will never trade with the Zionists. And number 3 is that they'll never work with the dirty trio, the Saudi Arabians, the Israel, or United States, that are really the ones that are inflicting the terror on the Middle East and funding the terrorist groups in the Middle East.
And the people are very supportive of Iran, for example, in the Middle East, in spite of their governments being so hostile to Iran and so fearful of Iran. And back when Ahmadinejad was in power, he was an extremely popular leader in the Middle East, in the Arab world. So, the Arab media and the Arab governments that are hostile to their Shia brothers, the people don't necessarily feel that way. And I mentioned earlier in the show and in the description of the show, and I believe Raphael read it, that 90% of the Syrian Arab army, which is defending the government, are Sunni. So they don't see it as a Sunni-Shia conflict. They see it as a political conflict. The whole sectarian divide is used as a facade. And Galloway has said it in that speech that I shared with you, Raphael, as well, the importance of Arab unity is going beyond the sector, that the West won't come and take their resources from. So Israel and the United States in particular are interested in maintaining the Arab divisions when they need to be united, like in the time of Nasser. They need to be united like when they had the African Union with Gaddafi. Muslims and non-Muslims, Africa and Arabia, they need to be united. Latin America is united. They should be able to unite. Europe should be able to unite. The working class and the struggling people of all societies of the developing world and the developing world.
Well, I want to also point out another thing is that, like the United States media, the United States media actually there's an operation in the government that actually stated that they will make sure that the corporate media, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox will all concur that Israel is always right and that they will make sure that there's no anti-Israeli material on the TV that was set a long time ago. Same thing with Al Jazeera.
They got rid of Rick Sanchez over his stance on Israel.
Al Jazeera supports all the fake opposition to Israel while claiming to be pro-Palestinian, but they're really, it's Qatar as well does the same Turkish game. Qatar uses the Palestinian cause to justify their backwards monarchy, but the thing is that they've done nothing to ever help the Palestinians, and that and they work with Israel, just as the other Gulf states do, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. And that they, and Al Jazeera makes lies against the real opposition to Zionism. They make lies against Assad.
Can I just speak for 1 second? I would say that I think sometimes you're making too absolute of claims because, some of these regimes have seriously helped the Palestinian cause in one way or another. Now, your overall claim that it was just a facade or something just for show is appreciated, but I think there were, especially in the conflict in 2008, 2009, when a lot of Palestinians looked at Turkey as possibly a new ally. They cut off cooperation in military. There was actually some public statements where the leader, the prime minister, walked off the stage with another leader of Israel, and I think there was some hope in the general Palestinian population, both in the occupied territory and the refugee camps and outside, that maybe, and I think that's lingered a little bit, even though there's been some step back by Turkey. With all that being said, I also think in Syria a lot of
the Palestinian cause. They claim to be pro-Palestinian, Syriza, and they made a military deal now with Israel. So I'm not just blaming the Turks here. You have these governments that give into pressure to do these things, and the people's will. It doesn't necessarily represent the Turkish will. The Turkish people are very sympathetic to Palestine, as are the Egyptians. So they need another Arab Spring or something to change this.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and there is that disconnect between the politicians and the people in a lot of these countries. But the other thing that I just wanted to say, I'm going to have to step away in a couple minutes, but that I think that the Palestinians not in Syria kind of look at the the conflict, and I don't know what your guys' perspective is on this, but at least from what I have read, a lot of this from just the mainstream media, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, because I wasn't able to get everything a couple months ago, but was that the Syrians are being brutalized by their own dictate or their own I don't know what you want to call them. I apologize if that's it. But whoever, right? This is what some Palestinians see, and they see that as possibly it could be them because they don't look at him as being sincere. That if he needed to retain power by slaughtering Palestinians, that he would do it. They've seen this again and again when people have supported them, and Israel applied pressure to that regime. Then all of a sudden, that regime turns on the Palestinian cause, such as happened in Lebanon and in Jordan. So I think that while Palestinians in Syria might, out of necessity, align themselves one way or another, I don't understand it, and I definitely don't get it from the Palestinians that I know.
Wanted to start his own government in Jordan, and then when that didn't work, he tried to do the same thing in Lebanon. So it wasn't just the fact that the governments in Jordan and Lebanon were slaughtering Palestinians. There was groups that were around Arafat, and I like Arafat, by the way. I think he was wrong then. He redeemed himself later. But there was groups that were armed that were around Arafat that wanted to take over the government there so the Palestinians would have a temporary state. And that's part of the reason why they started having conflict with the Palestinians.
Well, but the main reason to have the conflict with the Palestinians, and this has to be emphasized, was because of the pressure Israel applied to those regimes to crack down on them, because they knew that they could be bombed, and the capital city, like what happened in Beirut, could be totally destroyed and populations massacred just because they align themselves with the Palestinian cause of resistance and liberation. So the people in power in total in the Arab world, I myself look at as just being fake, because if they were really a threat to Israel.
I say that this claims of brutality. Let me go out because this is a very important one. Is that these claims of brutality about Bashar al-Assad, being brutal to his citizens, during the war, the claim about him barrel bombing, this is the one, neighborhoods and stuff. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of, civilian casualties due to crossfire as any war. So, it's like, no, I'm not defending that civilians have died. No, it's horrible, but it is war. And the Free Syrian Army uses the people as human shields because they guard themselves in cities. And so does the Syrian opposition.
They must have learned that from the Mossad.
They all guard themselves in the cities, and they use the civilians of the cities as human shields. The chemical weapons.
I got to step away for 15 minutes. I apologize. I'll be back.
I'll call back ahead. Call back later. Go ahead.
But I'm going to continue my point, though, is about the claims, though, is that the chemical weapons, one of the major attacks was a freaking movie, a movie set they brought in from Saudi Arabia, and then they staged it. That it didn't even happen. The Damascus gas attack of 2013, and of the supposedly chemical weapons that were supposedly used in Damascus in 2013 by Assad. It was all staged. And there was another, and then the other attacks, the Syrian rebels claimed to have chemical weapons, and there was more evidence that they did it than the government did it.
And there's something, to be fair, that Raphael might not know about because he was in jail when a lot of this was happening, and it's hard to get information in there sometimes. But let me just put this point out in case Raphael can't call back in later and he's going to listen to the recording later. What I was trying to say is the Free Syrian Army, some of the members were trained by Mossad. I mean, that's why I said in the description of the show that I thought Raphael read, it said, Syrian rebels or ISIS, Mossad CIA trained, right? So what I was trying to say is the fact that the Free Syrian Army was using human shields, they might have learned that from Mossad, from Israel, yes, because they were trained by the Mossad to an extent, and that's what Israel does with Palestinians. They use them as human shields in conflict.
Yeah, not only do they use them as Israel uses people as literal human shields in conflict, they use people ideologically, the Jewish people, as human shields under ideological debate. They equate, here's the thing is that their actions that Israel does, they try to make it seem like Israel and the Jewish people are one. So when Israel does something nasty, anti-Semitism goes to Jewish people as a whole, and then when you say something bad about Israel, they say that you're anti-Semitic, even though that the Jewish people as a whole, a lot of them, considering at the very beginning, they have like an association around the world of rabbis. They oppose the state of Israel. So I'm starting to think that the world majority is actually, that I don't. I
when
think it's
they
actually
captured the American journalists in Syria, ISIS. I mean, the Free Syrian Army, the so-called moderates, had control of them. They sold them over to ISIS. They're one and the same. There are no moderate rebels. They don't exist. If they left Syria long ago,
Well, there is. I don't think there was ever really moderates. Really, I think that the moderates were just kind of a myth made up by. And here's the thing that I really find absurd is that people talk about how Syria was before the civil war. They say that was a dictatorship. They say that Assad would crack down on any dissidents in the country. And then, even though it was a very modern country with a pretty modern style of government, a socialist style of government. And the funny thing is how could people that literally these fucking fat pigs that are in Qatar or that are in the Gulf states. I mean, I'm just going to go full out. I'm going to roast these fucks. These people that are 400 pounds eating just straight gourmet food, and they have no other responsibilities but besides to torture their own citizens. And keep their oil wells. They're so fucking rich. They're importing American whores into their palaces. That it's one long party until they go to hell. At a probably early age from a gourmet and food induced stroke that they have at the age of 55 for these Saudi kings or these I've said the last one lived to be 90. I think that shows one thing, that these evil fucks that are sometimes take charge of governments live to be a long time. Take a note of Kissinger in it's 92, and this guy looks like a fat Italian guy that said he's Jewish, but I'm just putting an example, and these people just piss me off. Or the fact that Rockefeller, I mean, he's totally out of shape, and he's 99 years old, and he just recently got a heart transplant or something, because they get the top medical treatment. I just answered my question. It's like I know why they live so long, but I'm just saying is that how could these backwards, they use religion as a cover, these monarchs tell Assad that his democracy is wrong, and really it's not really. The goal was never really a democracy. You never really claimed to be, because democracy is a flawed system. If we just look at Gaddafi's Green Book, and he lays it out how democracy is not the true goal. Is that the real goal isn't, in my opinion, is a system representative of the masses in general, direct representation. But a parliamentary democracy is a flaw. Maybe a direct democracy, that's a different story. But Assad, is not going to go for a European parliamentary democracy, and that was never really the goal. And sure, he has elections.
There is a Syrian parliament, but yes, it's not in the European model. They have their own type of democracy. In Cuba, you can say the same thing. For example, when there's no campaigns, there's no political campaigns in Cuba, but nobody in the cabinet or in the Cuban government is appointed. They're all directly voted by the people. Yes, there's not presidentials, but unlike the United States where they can appoint who they want once they've been elected, and like when Obama appointed the treasurer, a former Wall Street guy, stuff like that doesn't happen in Cuba. And don't get me started on Venezuela. They're extremely democratic. So every country has their own form of democracy. Not every country, but there are countries that the U.S. says are not democratic, but are in some ways more democratic.
How could the United States talk? The United States can't even talk. They're not a democracy in any sense of the word. They're an oligarchy because their president in reality does not even – we don't have a say. We have the Electoral College to make a say for us, and I think that's even a bigger sham to the point of the Bilderberg Committee. The Bilderberg Committee is where all the decisions are made by the top corporations and the top leaders, the other allied leaders probably, and the top corporations pick who's going to be the next president of the United States, because they can put whatever numbers they want at the general election. And I think that they rig it through the primaries in many different ways, but the Bilderberg Committee is the ultimate way that they rig the U.S. elections. The United States is not a democracy in any sense of the word, and to be criticizing the people actual democracy. See, Cuba, they have they can't, they don't pick their actual leader, but they pick everybody else. It's a Soviet democracy, I think is the word for it. And then Syria has their own style. In Gaddafi, he had a democracy too, but it was pretty much a Soviet democracy. Everybody under Gaddafi was picked,
And
Gaddafi.
you don't mean in the Stalinist sense. It was very Titoist as well, like Tito Yugoslavia.
Well, it's a Soviet democracy does not refer to Stalin. It refers to, I think that just the Soviet era's general. I think that some people call it a grassroots democracy, but it's like because they don't have because there is no political campaigning and stuff like that. It's directly from the people get a say, and they get the that might be a better word. It is these are grassroots democracies actually when you think about it. Libya and Cuba, and the people call them dictatorships. But it's really by the only person that doesn't change is the actual leader, the head of state, Castro, Gaddafi. But it's like they might be the ultimate leader. However, they don't make the majority. They don't make as many decisions as you may think. It really, in all reality, a lot of those people that the people elect make the decisions in those countries. And then there's the guy that kind of keeps it all together is the leader in those kind of democracies. And that's just a little lesson about what a real democracy looks like compared to the United States is a sham of democracy. It's a show, anyways. It's a dog and pony show. I think so. The idiom for that, it's a dog and pony show for the these elections that the United States has, and we're almost nearing another one. But what's going to happen is that they're going to have somebody that's willing to invade Iran, willing to continue this path that the United States is going on with, even where more and more police state heading towards a
I'll be right
military.
back, Chris, okay?
Huh?
I'll be right back.
Well, I was going to leave for a few minutes.
No, literally 2 minutes. I'll be back. Oh, I thought you said you were. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Number here first because
put up the number in case somebody else wants to call in.
Since Raphael's not going to call in towards the end of the show, and we still have 45 minutes left of this show, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. But Syria, it's really absurd. Some of the stuff that they say about Syria. And they also try to make it seem like the Assad's, it's all speculation. They're trying to make it seem like the Assad's, they've been saying that the Assad's time is numbered, his government's falling apart, but he's actually making significant gains against ISIS. I know it's been a year since really they started the counteroffensive against ISIS in eastern Syria. And of course, I think that they would have pushed them way further back if it wasn't for the United States airstrikes that are being counterproductive to the anti-ISIS effort, but they're actually helping ISIS effort, and that's not unintentional. That's very, very intentional. Very, very intentional that the United States is attacking the warehouses, crippling their food supply, crippling their economy by attacking their oil refineries. And they're not just doing that; they're attacking other sites, military sites that Assad has control of. And it looks like, from what I'm seeing, is that they're doing underground military operations. They're sending a few soldiers here against the Syrian army. It looks like that they've moved in small numbers of troops already, and there are boots on the ground in Syria to an extent. There are a few soldiers there, and they're going to up that number more and more. And the United States Army might do a full-fledged invasion in no time. I mean, they already started the rhetoric. And they've used ISIS as a ploy so far to get into Syria. Now they're going to use it as a ploy to attack Assad, because they're going to say that to assure democracy or whatever, they need to take out Assad as well while they're taking out ISIS. But the truth is they're not taking out ISIS, and the fact is ISIS would be part of the government coalition that'd be formed.
I'm back, by the way.
Once the Syrian rebels and ISIS take charge if the United States does an invasion. And yes, Al's back on the show. Okay. But I was saying is that I was saying that I really think that it's because I hear the rhetoric that it looks like it's people talk about that an invasion as it's a future tense thing that's going to happen in Syria, that purely as it's future that tense and it hasn't actually happened, but it's already happened. The United States has already invaded. There's already troops in Syria doing small missions against the Syrian government. So what's next is full-fledged invasion. And I think that's not far away, because they're going to say to assure democracy, they have to take out Assad as well. and they're going to say that they're going to be taking on ISIS when they're taking Assad. But really, they're going to be putting ISIS along with the other Syrian opposition into power, and then call and put them in a coalition of government. What probably would happen? And Syria would turn into a Sharia law state. I could just imagine once those people take power, and it'd be probably what would happen. Really, is that Syria would become another Saudi Arabia, and they, in the right, Syria is to the north of Saudi Arabia, so it'd be very convenient for Saudi Arabia, and then Iran would be left alone because really Yemen.
Is that you, Raphael?
Yes, I'm back. Yeah.
Oh, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, I guess since Raphael's back on the show, is that people. I want to dispel a very damaging rumor about Assad. They're trying to make people in the activist community, well, not even the activist community, because I don't think people in the activist community are dumb enough to believe this. But is that people mostly? It seems like it comes from, I don't know, but some people say that Assad and Israel are very connected, and they call Assad a Zionist, the Syrian rebel. Yeah, it's laughable.
That's as ridiculous saying he had the chemical attack when they caught him red-handed on the border. It was the Syrian rebels that had the chemical weapons. I mean, yeah, he had them as well, but he didn't no evidence he used them. But anyways, I just heard that Al-Aqsa Mosque, you probably heard about this, Raphael. Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem was attacked by Israeli soldiers. They entered in. This is just an incredible provocation. It's like they want another intifada, another uprising or something.
Yeah, I've been following that a little bit. It is. I mean, we'll see where it goes. I don't know.
That's where Muhammad ascended into heaven. It's the third holiest site in Islam. This is a provocation like what Sharon did when the first intifada came around in the 90s. I mean, this is just another provocation by Israel. And the Muslims are united in condemning this. Instead, you have so many divisions in the Arab League and other countries that don't represent the will of the people, sheiks and dictators and others. And it's sad, that acts like this can happen. And you don't even have, that I know about, a consensus on condemning that Israel's invading the sacred territory to Muslims, to over 1 billion people all over the world.
Yeah, I just want to say, and again, I just want to let you know my perspective. My perspective isn't very knowledgeable about Assad politics or the history of Syria or even the history of the Palestinian resistance in relation to Syria. That I know a little generally more about. But I just, overall, the general, perspective on this is, where was Assad when the past 3 massacres in Gaza were happening? You know what I mean? And let's say there is another uprising. There's almost been a continual uprising, but let's say there's another one that's more widespread that gets that title. What do we, I mean somebody coming from a Palestinian perspective, what are we going to see from Assad? You know what I mean? And I think that it's very unlikely that he will put the principality on the line to stand up for, the Palestinian cause and actually attack Israel. And I don't know if he's, I don't know about all the other great things he might have done or not done. But that's just where some of the skeptical supporters of the Palestinian cause, of these other regimes, I think stand. And the Palestinians themselves, they're very skeptical of these Arab leaders.
That Syria would be bombed to the Stone Age if Syria directly attacked Israel. Israel has nuclear weapons.
What?
They have the military superiority. There's things Assad can do, like support resistance group indirectly. But if him openly attack Israel would kind of be suicidal.
Listen what you just said, Raphael. You said attack, invade Israel or attack them. You know what Israel would do in retaliation? They have nuclear weapons.
I know.
That's what I just said, yeah.
I know. But the thing is, there are people right now where they're using those weapons against, and they're Palestinians. Now, a lot of these other Arab regimes don't want to have that same, problem. But the thing is, there are people that are suffering. It's not like right now everything's nice and lovely. No, F-16s are flying over Gaza daily. The population is being terrorized on a regular basis. So, yeah, you know, I mean, there are people that you know, I mean, I'm not saying Syria is stable right now, but they want to keep their control or try to keep their control. But I mean, the reality is Israel is using their weapons, and they are killing people. So, how much do you really support those people that you don't want to be on the business end of that? And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just trying to give the perspective, and that's what I decided that I was going to do when talking to you guys, of some of the Palestinians, most of the ones that I've talked to, in the perspective of Assad.
Israel wanted to keep Syria weak and divided, just as they wanted to keep Iraq weak and divided. This is in Israel's interest. You know, so the best thing that the Arabs can do to counteract the Zionist regime or entity is unite. Put these pagan regimes aside and unite against the Western imperialists and the Zionists, who are the common enemy. Because at one point, Hamas and Hezbollah are united. We're not talking about that far back, you know. And of course, now with what's going on in Syria, this division that Israel enjoys. You know, Mossad, CIA, you know, they helped form ISIS originally to go after Assad because they wanted Assad weak. Now ISIS is out of control, and I'm sure you agree ISIS needs to be taken care of. You know, they're going after Kurds when Salahuddin himself, the man who freed Jerusalem or Al-Quds for the Muslims from the Crusaders, was a Kurd. Was a Kurd from the same city as Saddam, ironically, in Tikrit. So, you know, what's this hatred from the Kurds coming from? They don't know their history, apparently, but the Kurds need to unite with the Arabs. They need to be together against the common enemy.
But, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but how can we then claim that the struggle for Assad to retain power has not also helped Israel? I really doubt that ISIS, which many claim, and I haven't fact-checked or researched some of these claims of the support by Israel and other, but do we really think that they could have prospered and gained as much support as they did if it wasn't for that conflict? If it wasn't for his, I mean, from my perspective and reading the papers that I have, New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, there was a systematic brutality. Now, we can claim, as America does and as Israel does, that happens because they hit among the population and all that other stuff. But to the Palestinians who hear Israel claim that every time that a whole family is wiped out, it doesn't really ring true. It sounds false.
Everything the press says, but one thing I'm going to say, Assad did make mistakes, and there was some peaceful protesters at the beginning. There was some overreaction and not knowing how to deal with the situation, but it was taken fully advantage of by militant groups backed by foreign powers like ISIS, who had, you know, an agenda from the very beginning to take advantage of the Syrian situation, much like they took advantage of the Libyan situation under Gaddafi.
Look, I want to point out something is that, you know, it's not really a question anymore if ISIS has Western influence, has Israeli influence, because they've been caught red-handed on video. They've been caught, you know, they've been caught with the funds going directly from the United States government. Their weapons are from the United States.
To them, accidentally, quote unquote,
that they have. That they stay in are from the United States. They were supported as a proxy against Assad. And another thing is that you can't take, you can't really believe anything that the New York Post or any of these mainstream media sources put, especially the Wall Street Journal. It's like out of all those, it's got to be one of the worst. I mean, they try to make it seem like rich people are all good and holy, and regular people need to try to go up to their level of holiness by being so rich.
Well, that's what Raphael had access to, and he can analyze things and see, you know, where bullshit's at a lot of times too. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to say, of course I know that. Believe me, you don't know how bad I get when I read the editorials. But still, there is usefulness for somebody that can, you know, I mean, get through the way they warp it, and they do actually sometimes give good research, even if it's hidden sometimes. And they always spin it, of course, but you can still, at least I can, condemn, find condemning facts in that material. You know what I mean? There's so I appreciate that, and that's why I stated where I got it from, because I knew it was biased.
People have motives behind what they reveal, but that doesn't mean that what they're revealing isn't factual somewhat.
Yeah.
Well, and also the people who we take credit for, we literally take credit for, or who we take our information for is from some of the. I mean, a lot of times, like I'll put up is like, even though that they're not. Sometimes it seems like they exaggerate, like with Greece recently, for example. I'm not going to say global research is perfect, but a lot of these websites they have done a lot more. I mean, literally, the thing they do a lot is in the name, research, global research. I mean, they have these very long articles that paint out the picture, with all the details, with Syria about what this is really about. And another thing is that the claims of brutality before, yes, there was Syria wasn't perfect like any other country really. I mean, I don't think that there's literally there's not. I don't think a perfect country. I mean, there's always be imperfections. However, is that a lot of it were fabricated, and you have to also realize is that what happened during the war is that it's very easy, from an outside perspective, if they tell you the Syrian government did it and you weren't there, then you're going to believe the Syrian government did it. But when the Syrian rebels and the Syrian government are clashing in the same area, it's very easy to tell that somebody else did something that they didn't do. Especially with like the use of chemical weapons that looks like by outside research. Even the UN said that it was 50-50 that the Syrian rebels did it. Outside
there was a UN rapporteur, an Italian lady, I forget her name. She said the only evidence was that it was the rebels. So there was actually a UN official who said it could only be the rebels, and they were caught red-handed in an ally country in Turkey, stopping at the border with chemical weapons. So I think this was a false flag.
Some of
them
was
set up to make it look like I saw it. Was that the first time to be a false flag? Right? I mean, Gulf of Tonkin. That's how Vietnam started. Is it any surprise? There's been so many episodes that have happened that were later on revealed as false flags.
I mean, I from the information that I got, and I mean, I haven't researched that recently. I mostly got it from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. It seemed to me overwhelmingly that it was the Assad regime that used the chemical weapons. Now, with all that being said,
he got rid of them for the Russians.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do I think that he wouldn't? I mean, I really don't know. And again, I'm coming from a perspective that says most of these Arab leaders do not want problems with Israel, and they will slaughter Palestinians to not have those problems, slaughter their own citizens not to have those problems. And I think even you guys can admit that Assad does not want war with Israel, because Israel will destroy him. So, would he kill his own population? Would he kill Palestinians?
On a small scale, maybe, like what happened in Lebanon.
But yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying.
Hezbollah actually were defeating a lot of the Israeli ground troops. You hear the Israelis bragging about how they draft everybody and how they're a superior army, but Hezbollah was kicking their asses. So a war on the small scale, Assad might be willing to do, but as we said earlier, full-fledged, all the odds are against him right now.
And so this full-fledged invasion brings the United States in. It would not just be a regular war if Syria invaded Israel.
I mean, everything Israel does, the United States is in.
That's invading Syria, probably, is that the fact is that Syria invaded Israel. Assad knows that, and all his military advisors know, that would lead to the United States coming in the war. The only help they would get would be Iran. Russia would back up.
Who really knows
this over this? And they would just end up with destruction of probably Syria and Iran. So it's like all odds are against them.
But so I hear what you're saying, and I mean, okay, that's a good point. But I feel like that point goes to the fact that Assad's main goal, I mean, and I'm coming just from a very selfish freedom for Palestine, having some sort of justice meted out isn't to fight, destroy Israel, or even to threaten them in a way that Israel could overreact. It's to kind of keep his little fiefdom and have the support of the oppressed refugees, the Palestinian refugees that really don't have anybody. So you can give them a little bit, as Arab regimes have done again and again and again and still do, and they align themselves with them because they're beaten so badly that if you just say some stuff and do a little things while overall denying them citizenship, denying them all these other things, that they'll still align themselves with you because they have no other choice.
Citizenship, and denied them citizenship in every Arab country except for Jordan, where now Palestinians are the majority, Palestinian descendants, including the Queen of Jordan, who's a Palestinian. But in every single Arab country, they're denied citizenship, and the reason given is in order to pressure Israel for a right of return. But it's debatable now, that justification, but that's been going on for decades. Maybe they should give them some type of citizenship so they can work, you know. But that's what's
there's been some advancement in some places in relation to being able to go to school and getting citizenship and some other things. But I mean, I was just speaking in general, like as what Palestinian refugees go through and why sometimes they align themselves in particular things. And I think to really understand the mindset of.
You there, Raphael?
It's like, I think he might cut off. I don't know. Yeah, he dropped off.
Is that your dog barking in the background, Chris?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hey, I think your dog's getting all riled up about Palestine, huh? Maybe your dog was a Palestinian in the past life.
No, my dog's a Chihuahua, and Donald Trump's on the TV, so he's pretty pissed off.
Hey, Chris, wait, listen. This is what I think. Palestinians are very intelligent people, okay? They're human beings. They'll get caught up in emotions and defend something that they're not sure about, kind of like Raphael's trying to say. But I think the majority of the Palestinians, including the Palestinian diaspora in Syria, etc., they're intelligent people. So they're going to think, okay, Assad's using me, but let me use him. Or they could think, no, I genuinely believe it's my best interest to defend Assad. So not just like these people coming out and say, oh, we're going to defend Assad because he said a couple things pro-Palestine. I think it's a little more than that. And Assad's going to have to give some more concessions to the Palestinians. But for people to try to manipulate the facts, I'm not saying Raphael's doing this, but let me just make this point real quick. For people to try to manipulate the facts and say, well, no Arab country except for Jordan has given them citizenship, that means they don't like Palestinians. That's ridiculous. The reason given, and I believe the leaders in the Middle East believe this, at least for a while, is, again, to pressure Israel to let the Palestinian diaspora return by not giving them citizenship, so they're in temporary camps and then return to Israel. But you can't really call them temporary camps at this point. We're talking diaspora from 48, from 67, etc. It's getting ridiculous at this point. They're afraid they're going to be taken over by Palestinians if they give them citizenship, especially after seeing what happened in Jordan. But look, the Palestinians are majority in Jordan, but most of them still support their monarchy in Jordan, especially since they have the queen, the Palestinian queen, Rania. So, but that's how a lot of it's viewed by other Arab governments or Arab people.
Well, it's comparing apples and oranges. If he's comparing, okay, Turkey does do what Raphael was claiming. They do extort, or they abuse the fact about the Palestinian cause in order to justify what they do in their government, or what Qatar does, and they do the same thing and say that they're supporting the Palestinians, but they are not. But the truth is that is that they're different, because Qatar, Turkey trade a lot with the Israeli government. So it's very hypocritical for them to be talking about Israel and Palestine, and talk about how they support the Palestinians, and how Assad supposedly doesn't, or whatever, if they were to go down that route. When they trade with Israel, Assad has never traded with Israel, never has recognized Israel, and has never, has never supported Saudi Arabia or United States, who they work very closely with. I almost think that Israel is the controlling force of the three. It seems like it's because the United States seems to just bow down to Israel, and Saudi Arabia certainly does. So they are. It seems like but it's. But
hey, Chris, is your battery fully charged? Because you're starting to break up a bit too. Are you charging your tablet you're talking into, or?
I'm talking into the tablet. I still got 16% of battery, so I guess I don't know why it's breaking up.
How long that lasts on a tablet. My laptop not long. You might want to plug it in.
16% on the tablet will last me. We only have, believe it or not, 20 minutes left of the show until the music kicks on. Less than that. Where it's already 10:40 Eastern time. If anybody wants to, I don't think Raphael's going to call back in. I don't know. But if anybody wants to call in last minute, 20 minutes of the show, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296.
One last time, to go to sleep
718-717-8296. Yeah. I wanted to say also is that the fact is that I think that again, it's like we'll cut Raphael some slack is that he didn't have much access to RT or Press TV or Globe. We don't. It's also I want to make it clear we don't rely 100% on those websites either.
Well, in 2009, alternative media was going on. You know what I mean? So I'm sure before he went into jail in late 2009, he was acquainted with these networks. I'm sure he's getting reacquainted with them as well. I mean, Marty himself, who's friends with Raphael and me, was on RT. So I'm sure Raphael's getting acquainted with those alternative sources and looking at the links that we're sharing. So hopefully he can open his eyes to what's going on more so over there. And nobody can say Raphael's an arrogant person. He's a very modest person. You can see how he speaks when I met him. You can see that about him. So he's very open to learning, and he made some good points,
Or the global research, he didn't have access to all the stuff we did. For
it depends what they talk about, because we said it earlier. Global research is wrong a lot of times too. They're more conspiracy theorists. Like to say that Seapress was a traitor is just inaccurate. That it was his plan all along. There's no evidence of that. You read the articles. They're sensationalists. They're like, there's no doubt that he knew all along. They provide the evidence. Could you read his mind? Did he confide in somebody that he wanted the negotiations to fail along, that he wanted there to be austerity? That's kind of ridiculous. To call him a coward, I'll concede that. He's a coward at this point, yes. Maybe he'll change and become more courageous later on. But to say that Seapress in Greece was a traitor, I mean, global research, they have a lot of good points on the Middle East and stuff like that. But on Greece, I think that they're wrong.
But, it's either sell.
Might as well be Alex Jones when it comes to Greece. I'm sure Alex Jones now is going to complain about Seapress. But, Alex Jones is a hypocrite. He probably complained about Seapress already.
So it's like, anyways, but Center Global Research is 90% of the time accurate, I would say. Alex Jones is accurate about 25% on most, it seems like.
That's a little too generous, but okay.
I think it's 25. I'll give it about that because yes, sometimes when he talks about the police state, I can't say that he's wrong because he has a common. We have common. We talk about that too, but that's just he puts.
Yeah,
I think
he doesn't want gun rights for blacks. He justifies the police acts against blacks. So when supposedly the police state only to an extent, Alex Jones,
And also, he talks about 9/11 and stuff, but then again, he completely ignores the Zionist role in 9/11 about the Mossad bands that were in New York City, or the jumping Israelis, or they call them the dancing Israelis, or the Mossad band. That there's one on the George Washington Bridge that they detained, that was full of bombs. And they had detained 60 Israelis that day, and almost all of them were sent back. I think all of them were sent back very quickly back to Israel. They didn't. You would think they would all have terrorism charges if they were actually, but if they were actually, just caught with the stuff. But no, it was all in the plan. The government was working with Mossad to do those acts, along with Saudi Arabia. It wasn't just a one-country deal. It was 3 countries. It's really, I think that's where the origination of the real, dirty trio started. Really ever since then they've been working hand in hand. But it really goes back even further than that. So that's not exactly accurate. They've been Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States have been working together for a long time.
And before that, the Saudis were working with the British and betraying the Hashemites who fought alongside Lawrence of Arabia, kicking them out of power, replacing with the Saudi family. Then the Hashemites set up the Kingdom of Transjordan. But yeah, I mean, the Saudis were complicit with the British imperialists, with the American imperialists. I mean, Prince Faisal was the only anti-imperialist Arab leader. and he died in mysterious circumstances. He was probably taken out in a similar fashion to Chavez. Even back then, they had access to those things. So, you know, when a real leader rises up like Gaddafi, or you could even say Assad, you know, they're sabotaged. You know, and the West wants to maintain those corrupt leaders like the Saudis that oppress their own people, and they're going after the Yemenis now. So it's really despicable what's going on.
Wait, wasn't that back like when Faisal was in charge a while back? That was back in like the 70s, wasn't it? When Faisal was
yeah, Prince Faisal, he did a lot of good, and he had an alliance with Nasser. So he was uniting the Egyptians and the Saudis against the imperialists. As a matter of fact, there's a Prince Faisal quote that I love, and we say Prince because he couldn't become king because he was an anti-imperialist, but he did have influence in the Saudi government at that time. One of my favorite Faisal quotes is when Kissinger threatened to stop doing oil relations with Saudi Arabia. Prince Faisal said, "We'll go back to living in our tents in the desert as we always have. It's not us that needs the oil; it's you." And that shut Kissinger up, you know.
You know what's the weird thing is that out of both people, Kissinger is the one that's still somehow I don't know. There's like a few of these people that are in our government or were in our government, these elites. I just don't get how these fuckers are still alive. I mean, it's like it's like
they go to the Mayo Clinic or something. Yeah.
I mean, well, you know what? It's just it's like I don't care how it happens. I mean, it's like I would hope it's in a hilarious fashion, like with some of them. Maybe Rockefeller, I don't know, he gets exploding caviar or something from one of his servants.
Conspiracy theorists say that they have extraterrestrial blood. I don't know what the hell the reptilian thing. I don't know.
They say that the reptilian. That's David Icke. They think that. I think that David Icke. I don't even think that he's a sellout really, and that he's being told to put intentional disinfo. I think that David Icke, unfortunately, he just went cuckoo sometime in the 90s. I mean, actually, at one time.
Yeah.
It's true though, because David Icke, he was actually kind of just a regular political activist, just kind of like me and you. He was in the Green Party of England back in the 80s. And before that, it's kind of weird. He's had an interesting life. I mean, in the 70s, he was a goalkeeper for a professional English soccer club, and then he became a soccer announcer after he finished his soccer playing career, or football, as everybody else calls it. Once he was done with his football career, then he started going to political activism about 10 years later. Then all of a sudden in the 90s, he started getting into all this, talking about lizardmen from space, how he talked to God or whatever. He started wearing all green or something like that because he believed that gave him spiritual energy. He even claimed at one point that he was the son of God. I mean, that literally did happen, apparently, sometime in the 90s.
Well,
and he
the green thing
played fool himself on
insane,
BBC.
But he was saying green because of the reptilian blood. I mean, that's a little nuts. I mean, yeah, it's in our DNA. We have a little bit of reptile in us, or we have a little bit of plant in us. But he takes it to a whole new level, like there's a reptilian conspiracy and aliens. I mean, he takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, he's kind of like Scientologists and how they set up their cults. That they believe in Xenu, this extraterrestrial entity. I mean, and then they take advantage of people while they're doing it. I mean, mostly rich people, but take their money so they can find out the truth about Xenu. And it's a religion based off of a cartoon character. The guy who founded Hubbard, the so-called religion, made the cartoon character Xenu and then formed his religion from it. So, they use the brainwashing techniques. I mean, I'm not saying David Icke is that bad, but certainly similar to that.
Well, Icke has done a lot to discredit the conspiracy, realist movement because people associate us with, people like them. They even start saying,
they're not realists. They're theorists mostly.
Yeah, but they associate us with them. They say, "Oh, you're gonna put on your tinfoil hat, and you're gonna put on your tinfoil hat to protect you from lizardmen from space or whatever." Start saying that kind of stuff. Just to make it seem like we all believe in that lizardmen from space.
What's ironic about Assad that we haven't discussed at all is that he's a secular leader, a secular leader with allies that are religious, Hezbollah and Iran. So it's interesting the contrast between secular and non-secular. Kind of shows that religion is just used as a cover when it enters politics a lot of times.
Well, it's like people
made a really good analogy. If you don't mind me making this point real quick, who really made a really good analogy about religion and politics is this guy named Sink, who's the founder of the Young Turks Network. And he said, as a former Muslim, that a way to convince Muslims not to mix Islam with politics is to tell them, do you want your beloved Quran in the hands of some politicians? Because a lot of Muslims are hostile to politicians in general. To put it in those terms, a lot of them say, no, we don't want that. And the Christians aren't blameless when it comes to that either. Look at the Crusades, the Inquisition, religion mixed with politics. I mean, for some reason, the founders of this country were wise enough to say separation of church and state. You know, religion and state in general. That's secularism. That's a wise policy, right?
I think that it's like I don't. It's like it really does depend, because it's like Iran. It's like they seem to have made it work out well. It's like, yeah, I believe generally in the separation of church and state. However, I do think that sometimes the use of that separation of church and state, they almost make it seem like that any member of the people almost make it stretch it like any member of the government shouldn't be able to have strong religious beliefs, or that people that even go to government institutions. As long as they don't
impose it on others. See, and that I disagree also with the Muslim Brotherhood.
I think
the Muslim Brotherhood should be made it in all parts of Egypt, and some parts of Egypt can get alcohol. But the Muslim Brotherhood wanted to make it state law for the entire country for there not to be alcohol use, even by Christians. And that's an imposition right there. That they're wrong on that domestic part, you know.
Well, again, it's like it's imposing religious beliefs that it's like I don't even it's like I think nowadays as a lot of modern Muslims, I don't know if it's like I'm not a Muslim to be able to tell if this is an extreme, if you are, that's really against the Quran to do so. But I think that it's almost like a thing that a lot of Muslims don't even follow that rule, because it's almost kind of like a super traditional thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. A way to get access to the alcohol, even in Saudi Arabia. I mean, but at least outwardly they're very against alcohol and.
I think it's not just Christians.
And they're not supposed to smoke tobacco either, but they do. I mean, tobacco wasn't around at the time of Muhammad, but that's supposed to be a vice, and all vices are bad. And yet, it's not legal according to the state, because a lot of Arabs do smoke tobacco.
Well, again, I think that what's the big giant Coptic Christian community that's in Egypt, and as we saw, they were targeted by ISIS. Is that they came recently back in the news? Is that with that giant Christian population, they're very friendly to the Muslims in Egypt. There should not be an alcohol ban, because if there is, I mean,
right,
it's a big population that are affected.
Because
there shouldn't be an alcohol ban anywhere.
In their churches, right? They use wine in their churches, and they prefer to use alcoholic wine, like Jesus had access to wine in his time. And what I don't understand about the Mormons is that they make alcohol illegal. It's like, didn't they know the story of the Last Supper? Like, he's drinking wine. It's kind of a contradiction there. But then again, they think the new Jesus is a guy named Joe Smith. I don't know if they believe in like reincarnation or what. Like I respect people's religions. When they explain it to you, it's just sometimes I want to laugh, and they've been brought up believing that. We got another caller here. Hello, you're on the air.
It's not Raphael.
Hello. Hi, Chris from Canada.
Hey, how you been, Chris?
Good.
It's been a while.
Good.
Today's topic was a lot about what's going on in the Middle East, but if you had any questions, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, you were talking about David Icke and reptilians. Okay, we got do you know that we had here in Kanakistan, we got Paul Hillier, who was our defense minister and deputy prime minister of Canada, who is going along with that stream of promoting. Go ahead.
He promoted the reptilian conspiracy or whatever
Yes.
David Icke, the kind of stuff David Icke promotes.
Yes.
But
yes.
wait,
and then
what was his
people,
position?
Because he's such a popular figure, people you really got to sit back and think, this guy was a deputy prime minister of a country. He was a defense minister of a country, and and he knows that aliens are the ones that rule our Earth.
Well, he can't know it.
So are we all gone crazy, or are we all just really stupid?
Well, Chris and I are typically anti-government, but yeah, if this guy in that position and being able to say what he said, there's probably an ulterior motive behind it. But again, he can't know that. He can believe that because there's really no evidence of that. But that's kind of like we sometimes we go off topic a little bit. So that part of the show, we did mention David Icke a little bit. But what's important is like it's not really what's in your blood. It's like this is the policy they're doing. This is the motive behind it. What can we do about it? It's like when they're doing this intervention in the Middle East, what's the real reason? That's how we think. Like we investigate stuff. Like when they said it was a humanitarian intervention in Libya or Syria, it's like what's the real reason behind it? Is it oil? Is it to keep division among these people over there? Why should we go along with our tax dollars being used in Canada also getting involved in these conflicts? Ukraine. What's the reason behind it? That's how we try to see things. We don't say, that their ancestors might have been reptilian, there might be conspiracy. That's kind of irrelevant to us. We say that jokingly sometimes in the program, but in all seriousness, like it's about what are they doing and what's their motive behind it, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Well, it's like why would the
exactly. I mean, we're talking distractions here, right?
Yeah, that's probably why he said it.
Ultimately, that's what we're talking about is distractions.
Sometimes the government think about it. All this alien stuff is covered by the History Channel, a freaking mainstream media channel. So there's a reason why they put
blah, blah, blah.
They fill people's minds with bullshit. Conspiracy theories that really don't do anything, and they don't talk about the real conspiracy theories: 9/11, JFK, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in South America.
Right.
Yeah.
We're in the last couple minutes of the show, but yeah, go ahead.
But you guys are on topic tonight. I appreciate that. You're on topic. You're talking intelligent stuff. But we got to get this out. We got to get people to understand that we can't be be fooled by aliens.
We can't be fooled by anybody. You know what I mean? It's like the politicians in general, that dominate Western politics are doing their best to use the corporate media to deceive us of their imperialist agendas that they're imposing on the developing world, especially in the Middle East. And that's why what's going on in the Middle East is important, because if they're going to do it to them, they can end up doing it to us here at home. And we have to expose the injustices that the governments are causing other weaker nations.
Thank you, my friend. I like to hear that.
Well, it's pretty cool because I was wondering, because we were actually thinking, like, what happened from Chris to Canada? He called in the first show only, and then he didn't come back. And then if he showed up this show, I was actually pretty surprised.
We had a war with InfoWars last time he called, Chris. The conspiracy theorists sent their guy to try to say that we supported killing protesters in Ukraine. Now, if you go on YouTube to listen to the recording of our show and you put in Voice of Repel and you see why, his video comes up where it's the part of the show that he calls in and we made him look ridiculous and everything he was saying trying to attack us. And he was so stupid that he actually posted the recording of when he called into the show. And then we did like a counter show against guys like this because
it was called Conspiracy. We're conspiracy theorists.
They understand that we're different than them, that we investigate our stuff, that we're not cherry pickers,
Yeah. No, I love you guys. No, I do. And that's why I called in.
Always good to have a call from abroad. Thank you so much, Chris. We're going to be on the last minute here. Chris Rojas.
Yeah.
Chris J. Chris J. I called you by your other name. Go ahead and give the last word.
Yeah, Chris J here. It's like I gotta say that with Syria, it's like good resources to go to. Go to Press TV, do your own independent research. Really got to do some Google searching. That's how I do. I've went through a lot of hours trying to find new stuff about Syria, about more U.S. what the U.S. is doing in Syria. Going to RT is where I learn my basis. If you're really just looking for a basis, and you can learn, it's good for new news, but it just doesn't seem like they cover Syria that much because they cover Ukraine and their own problems and over there.
One and no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidence. accidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which